Hey everyone, it is a pre-recorded look at your astrology of the week of April 14th through 20th, 2025. I'm going to be away, so that's why I am pre-recording this. But we have some things to catch up on. Namely, we have the Libra full moon that, even though it just happened, the full moon it sort of comes into the week with us. We are beginning to wrap up eclipse season. Yes, the solar eclipse of March 29th is behind us, but this eclipse is still with us for the next 6 months. Yes, 6 months. And we'll talk a little bit about that because we have two planets changing signs this week. We have Mercury going into Aries, where it started its retrograde back on March 15th. And we also have Mars going back to Leo. So let's dive in. Let's talk about this full moon that we had on Saturday, April 12th. This full moon was at 23 degrees of Libra. Libra is a lot of things. It is a relational sign. Of course, it's not just people, but it is the exchange of things, exchange of information. That's one of the functions of the air signs, and Libra is an air sign. So we had a full moon, and it's just to sort of check in like what was going on, because this full moon was 2 weeks after a solar eclipse. So they are connected, they're part of the same story. And sometimes the full moon after a solar eclipse, even if it's not an eclipse, can bring things into focus. We also had Venus turn direct at 24 degrees of Pisces. So the energy of the full moon went over to Pisces, and Venus is in the ballpark of the North Node. It's also in the ballpark of Saturn. So this is a full moon where relationships in all their various forms were in the spotlight. This could be a relationship with a neighbor, a relationship with a lover, a relationship with a parent, a relationship just with the general community as a whole. And so with the energy of Saturn and Venus, there is an element of needing to set boundaries, set borders, to reevaluate things, to create new structures, new commitments, to recommit to a relationship. So that's on our minds, perhaps. At least it's in the energy of things as we start the week on April 14th. This full moon was also doing two things. It was square Mars. So Mars is a pretty an energy that can sort of activate, motivate, and can create events, and also can bring up strong emotions. And Mars is certainly a major factor in the astrology for the first 6 months of this year. I will come back to that. And then this full moon also made something called a conjunction to Chiron. I didn't really speak about that last week. I wanted to talk more about how the energy of the eclipse moved over to Cancer, and how it will really activate the signs of Aries and Cancer for the next 6 months. But we do have Chiron that's a part of the story. And the thing about Chiron is that Chiron is a newer addition to astrology. Chiron, it doesn't really work on a physical level. It's not tangible. It gets into the emotional and spiritual. These things that hit a nerve, they strike a nerve, that I know that it can sometimes even bring up a pain point. For example, what is going on in our lives may actually touch on something more deeply. It might get into a deeper emotion around relationships and connection. It may get into emotion about where do we belong, or what do we want. Aries, to go back 2 weeks ago to that Aries solar eclipse, what are our desires? What are our needs? How do we stand up for ourselves? How do we go after what we want? For example, Venus, Libra is more about negotiation. Aries, Mars, is more about the I and the individual, so it can create a bit of a push and pull. So whatever tug of war we have going on right now, metaphorically speaking, may touch on a nerve, touch on a pain point, and something that is both ours and not ours as well. Maybe something deep is coming up. It's sort of tingling in our subconscious. It's right on in the subliminal. And it's to really sit with anything that we are feeling is coming up at this time, for example. This full moon, again, it takes us into this week. We are at the last week of Aries season as I record this, and actually the sun will go into Taurus as we get onto the 19th, so later this week. We'll save Taurus season for next week when I get back. But we also have, like, as I said, 2 planets changing signs this week. And this is the real major, even though it seems a little bit subtle because planets typically change signs very often, unless you're Neptune, unless you're Pluto, 2 planets that made changes for the first time in some cases in 16 or 14, 15, 16 years. But Mercury typically changes signs every 2 weeks. Mercury is what's called a personal planet. It talks about how we think, how we communicate, how we listen. And Mercury, as you may or may not recall, it turned retrograde back in Aries on March 14th of 2020. March 14th of just like last month. I don't know why I'm thinking 2020, 2025. So just last month. And Mercury turns retrograde every 3-4 months for 3 to 4 weeks at a time. So that's not that uncommon. But Mercury is important in the case of the current astrology because it rules the South Node at the moment. The South Node is where we are having eclipses. So we're having eclipses in Virgo. And we had an eclipse, a lunar eclipse in Virgo back on March 14th of just last month. So the thing about eclipses, and I talked a bit about this last week, is that they plant seeds. Certainly the solar eclipse, it opens up a container of time, and that container of time is over the course of the next 6 months. The lunar eclipse typically has more of an immediacy to it. Things happen. Things may have happened around that lunar eclipse on the 14th of March. But not always. It can plant a seed, and so we sort of know intellectually that 23 degrees of Virgo, which is where the eclipse was, is a hot point, to put that in quotes. So we need to look, well, what's going on when anything hits 23 degrees of Virgo or 23 degrees of the mutable signs? A little bit of a technical point, but what I really am looking at this week is that Mercury goes into Aries. So Mercury, it finished its retrograde on April 7th, and going into Aries this week, April 16th, it returns to the sign of its retrograde. Now, to pass from Pisces, where Mercury is as I record this, to Aries is the equivalency of going from a space that is about waiting in the wings. Something is getting ready to start. Something is ending. Something is in this more like this liminality. It's the dream, Pisces. To Aries, reality, new beginnings, and fresh starts. Astrology, hear me say it very often, astrology is time and the energy of time. And so Mercury moving to Aries takes that seed that was planted with the eclipse and it moves it from liminality, potentiality, waiting for something to happen, to new beginnings, Aries. And so we may see that wherever the Virgo part of our chart is located, that there might be a movement, there might be a new beginning. Mercury is also about choices as well, a need to speak, a need to communicate, a need to weigh our options, a need to move. Mercury is about movement. And Virgo is certainly a sign that does talk about health and wellness and trying to hopefully become the better version of ourselves and to help people, for example. So it's just something that I have my eye on as an astrologer. Mercury, I believe it gets back to 9 degrees next week. Well, that's Mercury on April 16th. It's going into Aries, but then there's Mars. So I said this last week, and I certainly have been saying this to clients of mine about, what to expect in 2025, a year that is very uncommon for a lot of reasons that would be longer than what we're trying to do today. But the way that I explained it last week is that 2025, it's like it has 3 acts. I'm oversimplifying things, but that first act is roughly the start of the year. Really, it does dip back into 2024. And then also, it takes us to the end of May. And then we have June, July, and August is the second act. And then the third and final act is the end of August, going all the way to the end of the year. That first act is what I'm focusing on because Mars is the main driver for this act. Why? Because Mars was retrograde from December 6th until February 23rd. And Mars as a personal planet talks about what do we desire? What do we want? How do we stand up for ourselves? How do we go after what we want? How do we assert ourselves? Our relationship with power, for example. So Mars going into it turned retrograde on December 6th and Leo, and it went back into Cancer on January 6th. While Mars was retrograde, and even when it was direct in September, October, beginning of November, it was opposite Pluto. It's a pretty intense aspect in general. If you have Mars opposite Pluto in your own personal astrology, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is an energy. It is like great willpower. And then when it's used positively, you can use it to move mountains. You can use it to call upon great strengths of reserves. Typically, you see Mars-Pluto aspects in professional athletes, for example. So Mars, it was doing this opposition to Pluto. We had the first opposition on November 3rd, the second opposition January 3rd of this year, and the final opposition will be April 26th. So that opposition is really the umbrella that is driving a lot of the astrology, even if it's behind the scenes, into the end of May. And what this has been saying to us personally is that we need to transform and reform how we use our Mars. If we're afraid to take action, then how do we face our fears and then learn sort of to stand on our own 2 feet, to go after what we want? Our own relationship with Mars, and certainly our relationship with this opposition since the end of last year, is highly personal. Because Pluto really helps us to see the level of the soul and the things that are typically hidden from us. That part is highly individualistic and your own personal journey, of course. So as we go into this week, Mars returns to Leo on April 18th. And so that is, I believe, Thursday. Friday. And so we have that opposition that starts to kick in even more. Again, the 26th of April is when we're going to have that final opposition. And so Mars changing signs, it doesn't just begin to wrap up its retrograde shadow. A shadow just means that it's retracing its steps that it either went back to or returned to. So until Mars clears 6 degrees of Leo, it's still in the retrograde shadow. But Mars going back into Leo means something really important. Let's go back to that new moon solar eclipse of March 29th. It was at 9 degrees of Aries, so that part of the sky is a hot spot for the next 6 months or more. And that solar eclipse talks about powerful new beginnings. And again, Mars was in Cancer at the time of the eclipse, so Cancer receives the energy of the eclipse. Even though we technically have a mutual reception, it also is as if Mars is in Aries, but that's another conversation. So for us this week, with Mars, the ruler of that eclipse from the 29th, moving back into Leo, it takes the energy of the eclipse and it actually moves it over to Leo. And then it does it opposite Pluto. So it is a different phase of the eclipse energy, even though you're thinking, wait a second, March 29th was a few weeks ago. Like, how is that still present? Well, time is not linear as we think of it. It's kind of a spiral. It's a circle. And so we will see different points where this energy is activated. So it's something to keep an eye on. Certainly a Mars opposite Pluto energy, I think in its best possible light, is to clear space for something new. And it's just something to sit with, to reflect on. What space do I need to clear to go into, let's say, the second act or even into May of 2025? Because something needs to shift, something that typically we don't see. Sometimes it's typically within, and it's to change our relationship with power, will, desire, Mars. And if you, this is a bit technical, but if you know some astrology, that the opposition will be at 3 degrees Leo Aquarius. So that's our other hot spot for the astrology. So it's a turning point week, one where these two planets changes signs, and it will bring us into next week, which it'll of course be Taurus season. But now it's Taurus season with the energy of the eclipse pointing towards Leo. Leo is Taurus's sign of home and family and roots and foundation. It's a little bit some technical details, but it just sort of tells me as an astrologer that perhaps the second half of April is going to be a little intense. We will see. Maybe I'm wrong. But that said, those are our major focal points for this week. Again, it will be Taurus season on the 19th. Happy early birthday, Taurus. We'll talk more about this when I'm back from my trip and what Taurus means for all of us, as well as what part of that is in our astrology. So I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, and we'll look at where this Mars-Pluto opposition is where is it pointing the energy towards Leo, and the energy of that eclipse that we just had. So this sort of builds upon what I talked about last week. So let's start with Aries. Aries, so Mars is your planet. So this is a big week for you. Your planet finally changes signs. It's been in Cancer since since January 6th. Before that, it was from I think it was September 4th until November 3rd. It was in Cancer. So it's just been a big part of your astrology over the past 6-7 months, if I'm doing my math correctly. And so for you, Cancer is the sign of home and family. So it's been so much about your home, your living situation. Of course, this is going to mean different things to different people. Perhaps you have moved, perhaps you are planning for a move, maybe you're making changes in the home. This could also talk about family members or the desire to put down roots, however, whatever relevant that way is for you, for example. So with Mars changing signs this week, it goes into Leo. Leo is your sign of creativity, self-expression, identity. Who are you? Aries. This is where Mars started its retrograde back on December 6th, and Mars was opposite Pluto. So there has been some sort of need to really do a lot of deep inner work around the self, around your deeper inner emotions, the past, memories, family, since even, I would say, September, October, and even into the end of April. Mars moving into Leo also moves the energy of the eclipse into a space that talks about you. You just had a solar eclipse in your sign, Aries. Aries, this says that it is a dynamic time in your life, a time of new beginnings, a time of taking action, moving forward, but at the same time, it is wrapping up an eclipse cycle that was from 2023 and 2024, because we had eclipses in Aries in April 2023 and also in April of 2024. So here we are, the energy is moving, and maybe it is time for you to get back to you, to get back to the things that light you up and give you joy. But in order for that to happen, something needs to clear. There's that energy of Pluto, and this takes you into next week and even into the end of April. What needs to make space in your life, or even make space within, for you to be yourself, for you to be fully in your desires, your creativity, your self-expression, for example. Mercury is going to Aries, so this is starting this sense of things starting to pick up, especially when Venus gets back to Aries. I think it's the end of this month. But there's just been so much going on in your 12th, which on some level talks about things coming to an end. But I think it goes back to what I just asked a few moments ago. What needs to leave or what needs to clear so that a new beginning can take root? Taurus. Taurus, so Venus is your planet. So Venus is now direct. It turned direct on April 12th. And now that your planet is direct, it doesn't mean that you were in time out for the last 40 days. It just meant that you needed to integrate something. You needed to go back. You needed to connect your intuition. Venus right now is in Pisces. Venus actually loves Pisces. It's the sign of its exaltation, but it's a sign that really is pointing you towards the future. Venus as your ruling planet is so much, especially for a Taurus, about value and investment. It is a time for you to invest in your future, to invest in the people, the friends, the community, what's going to really nourish and support you moving forward. This space in the astrology is also a space where we will see eclipses in September. We already saw eclipses back last September. So that it's part of this bigger part of your story where it's about opening up to new community, making new friends. Ironically, because Saturn has been there since 2023, maybe you don't have the same social circle that you had at the start of 2023 versus now. But who remains? Saturn's always about creating rock solid friends and relationships and community when it goes to this part of the chart. Speaking of Saturn, Venus is doing a little bit of a dance around Saturn at the moment, so you've got a bit of weight and pressure on you. You have to take things seriously. You have to make things real. You cannot cut corners, but again, to really put your time and effort around the things that are truly of value to you and your future. And Pisces, it's not monetary value. It is emotional and an even spiritual value. We're having Mars change signs this week, and Mars is going into Leo. And for you Tauruses, Leo is something called your fourth sign. It's home, it's family, it's roots, foundation. And so Mars going into this part of the chart, it moves the energy of the eclipse into the home environment. The thing about that eclipse, it was in something called your 12th. Speaking of spirituality, that's one of the facets of the 12th. Aries is your 12th sign. Spirituality in the sense of how do we find meaning and purpose in this world? How do we go within? How do we make peace? How do we let go? And that energy will start to point towards home and family, but also past and memories. And so you may find, especially as you go into June, a need to really let something go. Taurus, I know you hold on to things. Typically it's physical, but it can also be emotional as well. And the energy of this eclipse and even the energy of Mars opposite Pluto is asking you to clear something away so that either you can create stronger roots or you can access a part of yourself that you haven't been able to access because there's been something in the way. Gemini. So Mercury is your planet, and Mercury is going back to Aries. And so it started its retrograde in Aries back on March 15th, and it returns to Aries on April 16th. So you needed some time to go back to Pisces. Pisces is something called your 10th sign. Mercury retrograde is always an opportunity to retrace our steps. It's not a fate. Your life's not in pause or time out, but it's to listen to your intuition, to not rush forward, to do things the right way. And certainly with Mercury hanging around Saturn, it is to always do it the right way, not cut corners. Not that that would be you, Gemini, of course not. Mercury going back into Aries. Aries is something called your 11th sign. It's friends, it's community, it's social issues, it's social causes. And so even though Mercury will relatively move more quickly, especially now that it's gaining some speed, it is to look towards your friends, your community, to make alliances, to reevaluate the alliances that are in your life, but it also is to look towards the future. What do you want? What are your hopes and dreams for the future? Mercury is also the ruler of that March 14th lunar eclipse, and so it moves the energy of the eclipse towards Aries, and that eclipse talks about your home environment, your living situation. Maybe you're thinking about moving, maybe you don't want to move. Certainly an eclipse and a move are very classic peanut butter and jelly type of combination, but it could also talk about a need to put down roots within, to figure out where is home and who is home. And certainly there is home of our relatives, our family, and home for people who aren't physically related to us. And it's to create a sense of community and connection and people who will nourish you, whether they are related to you or not. But again, it's to look towards the future. Mars going into Leo. Leo is something called your third sign, voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. And so Mars is going to typically give you a lot to say. Maybe it's just a very busy time over the next until the middle of June, because that's how long Mars will be back in Leo. But you will have that final opposition to Pluto. This will be next week. And so Pluto is in something called your ninth sign. What do you believe in? What do you stand for? There is a big push and pull happening between, it could be matters of faith. It could be matters of what do you believe in, your philosophies. It's a bit of an intense energy. I think on some level, it's always to find the medium. It's to listen to people. It's to figure out, like, do you need to look at things a little bit differently? But my only concern is that Mars opposite Pluto can be a little bit combative. But hopefully in the highest expression, it can help you see the world differently and open up to new ideas and new perspectives. Cancer. Cancer. So the moon is your planet. And so this week it just had a lunar eclipse in Libra. Libra is something called your fourth sign of home and family. So the living situation is very much in the spotlight at the moment. And then the moon, as you start the week, it's in Scorpio. Scorpio, it brings up emotional energy. It is a water sign just like you, and to sort of sit with what is stirring. It's in Scorpio Monday, Tuesday. I think it's back into Sagittarius by Wednesday. Sagittarius says that you really kind of wrap up the work week needing to tend to projects, work, health and wellness, for example, and then you go into the weekend where it's about relationships. Relationships, both romantic relationships, really relationships and socialization on a bigger level. So let's go back to that solar eclipse that we had on March 29th, because it was in something called your 10th sign. The 10th sign is the title after our name. It is the role that we play in the world. It is the how people see us, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a writer, whether it's a CEO, whatever it is. And so that new moon solar eclipse also says that over the next 6 months, there could be changes in that title, or there could be changes in your career or the role that you play in the world. With the energy of the eclipse, it was pointed towards you, Cancer. So this is a time where you are really taking action, really needing to stand up for something, to go after what you want. Mars is not a negotiator. Mars is all about power and what it wants. That said, Mars will leave Cancer, finally leave Cancer after a couple of months or 3 months, and it will go into Leo, where it started its retrograde. In Leo, Leo is something called your second sign of money and income. And it says that from the 18th of April all the way to, I forget what date in June, it's around the middle of June, I think like the 17th or something, Mars is going to be in your money sign. And so there will be a direct connection between this eclipse and the new beginnings and income, material stability and security, the things that you're buying, the things that you're investing in, that sense of resources that you have available to you. Mars will make a final opposition to Pluto. Perhaps it has been tense at work, or perhaps it has been tense in your career, but this has been a time for you to make some pretty big changes in your relationship with power and control, desire, but also even self-worth. So it might be a little bit of an intense week to be a Cancer as we go into next week and even into the end of April. Leo. Leo, so the sun is your planet and it's wrapping up its time in Aries this week, and Aries is your 9th sign. So this has been a philosophical time for you, a time for you to really look towards the world, look outside of yourselves, travel, long distance travel, foreign travel, book trips, but also maybe to write, to speak, to publish, to focus on your education as well. Mars will move into back into Leo, and this will be on your sign. It will be on April 18th. So the kind of the funny thing about Mars being in Cancer for so long is that it's been behind the scenes. It's been a time for you to meditate, to take that energy of Mars, but put it towards either spiritual pursuits or internal search for truth and meaning, and trying to really, open up something. Especially with the energy of Aries, that Aries eclipse, it just will be more of an existential, spiritual, and even philosophical time over the next 5 months. Mars going back into Leo re-energizes you. It gives you back your mojo. It gives you back your ability to sort of feel like you're moving forward and taking the reins. And Mars makes its final opposition to Pluto. Pluto is in your 7th sign of relationships. It's been there since November. It's part of this bigger change in structure that's happening in your life around relationships. This is not just romantic relationships. This is how you show up. This is how you interact and socialize with people. Something is changing, and the Mars-Pluto opposition, it is the second one. You have to go back to the beginning of January, the opposition on January 3rd, but this is right across Leo and Pluto. So it says that there is a lot of force and push on you in that last 2 weeks of April to transform and reform. It could be around relationships. It could also talk about power. It could talk about belief and faith and truth and meaning. But it's a bit of an intense time to be a Leo. It also takes as the energy of the eclipse and it moves it towards you. It's a time of new beginnings. It's a time of taking action and moving forward, but with the energy of the eclipse. So things may really start to move and shake as you go into the rest of the month and even into May. Virgo. So Mercury is your planet, and Mercury is going back to Aries this week. As you probably know, it wrapped up its retrograde. It turned direct on April 7th, and that part of your chart is Pisces, and it's relationships. Really to look back, especially since, I think it's February, and certainly with Pisces season and Saturn being in Pisces, even since 2023, where relationships have been a major focus. All relationships, and to really realize that you're at a time in your life where it's more about other people and needing to find the balance between your wants, your needs, your desires, and the wants and needs and desires of other people. Perhaps you have made serious relationships or started serious relationships with people during this time. Mercury, since it rules you, it's going to move you back into the 8th. Aries is something called your 8th sign, and the 8th is a space where we all need to face ourselves. This is getting back into themes that you were very probably well present with, whether it was February or March, where is a need to look at yourself. A need to look at themes around vulnerability and trust and power and control. And while Mercury will, just looking at my calendar, while Mercury will move quite quickly, of course, the time I want to look at my calendar, it says 2020 on it, will move quite quickly through Aries, because it's kind of coming on the other side of its retrograde period. It's in Taurus on May 10th. That's not Mercury in Taurus, May 10th. Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's a whole month in Aries, but it just says that as you go into the second half of April and the first half of May, it is through the lens of the eighth to look at yourself, to do the inner work. Then after May 10th, you will go into the ninth, and it is to sort of take all these sort of lived experiences and to make wisdom and knowledge out of it. But I'm getting ahead of things. The thing that Mercury certainly changing signs this week is another thing to focus on, because it rules that Virgo eclipse that we had on March 14th. And that eclipse, of course, put you in the spotlight, but it says that it's just a big time in your life. It's about you, it's about relationships, about new beginnings. And it moves the energy over to the eighth. And that might say to you that it's a need to really examine, to really truthfully examine yourself in order to see something that will enable you to step more clearly into this new beginning. It's a little bit emotional, it's a little bit philosophical, but it's to see how this is relevant in your life. The other thing is Mars. Mars going into Leo, and Leo is your 12th sign. When Mars goes into the 12th, it's typically you're wrapping up a 2-year period in a time where you need to like go inside yourself. You need to rest and relax and prepare for the next cycle, and that will be in the middle of June when Mars goes into Virgo. If Mars is action, power, and drive, it's now pointing towards the 12th. The action and power is happening behind the scenes. It's in your quiet alone time, it's in your sleep, it's in your dreams, it's a need to rest again and recuperate. But Mars is also the ruler of that Aries of solar eclipse that we had on March 29th. And so the talk with Mars going to Leo, there is a conversation that is happening between the 12th and the 8th. These two spaces, they're water spaces. They're emotionally driven. They're a need to uncover 8th and reveal the 8th. But the 12th is meaning and purpose, but it's meaning and purpose that we don't find outside of ourselves. We find it within. So there's a lot of emotional energy that's very well present over the next couple of months. And that's for you to see how this eclipse is moving into these very quiet spaces. And maybe to use this time just to create personal rituals, to meditate, to reflect, and this will help you open up to this new time in your life. Libra, so Venus is your planet, and Venus has just turned direct. So it turned direct in Pisces, and Pisces is something called your 6th sign. This has been, especially with Venus back in Pisces, I think I think Venus went back into Pisces March 27th. So the last few weeks with your energy in Pisces, it's about projects and work and health and wellness and needing to put things in order because Saturn is there as well. And Saturn is Saturn, and Saturn is always setting the bar higher for us. And maybe you feel this push to either kind of get your stuff together or to really get clear about something in your life. For some Libras, again, it's about health and wellness, but for some Libras, it could even be about service and helping other people. Venus is not done with its conjunction to Saturn. In fact, I think it's next week that it has its final conjunction to Saturn. And this energy was, of course, present in the Libra full moon. Your Libra put you in the spotlight. But that energy of Saturn carries you, I think, even into the end of this month. It's to get real. It's to, that's the thing about Saturn. It's a very real black and white planet, even when it's in Pisces, this sign that's so much about spirituality and compassion and feelings. And Saturn also talks about responsibilities and duties, and maybe more is being asked of you at this time, Libra. We just had that solar eclipse in Aries, your relationship sign, so this could also talk about relationships and sort of duties and responsibilities within the relationship. And this energy of the solar eclipse, it's been pointing towards Cancer. Cancer is your career sign. It could be, again, responsibilities, your role as your title in the world. But the energy of the eclipse with relationships will now point towards the 11th. It could be the future, making sure you and a partner or you and another person are on the same page. Maybe you're thinking about the future that you want to create, the friends, the community. Relationships are not just one-on-one, but they're also about the people in our lives. So this energy about duty and responsibility and sort of taking something real or seriously could also apply to looking at the friendships and community in your life. Mars, which rules relationships, will be opposite Pluto throughout the end of the month. It's a bit of an intense energy that's saying that perhaps, and it depends on your life, because it could be a romantic relationship that this is happening within, where the relationship has to transform. And I'm saying have to because that's the energy of Pluto. The relationship has to transform. And so Mars will be opposite Pluto. And so even if you're not in a relationship, how you show up, how you set boundaries, how you negotiate and compromise with people has to transform. It is on some level to find your power and also to perhaps even to face something within yourself. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and Mars is changing signs this week. It's finally getting out of Cancer, where it has been for the better part since September 4th, except for a little bit in Leo. The ninth is so much about what do you believe in, what do you stand for, this desire and need, Mars, to look outside of yourself, to educate yourself, to travel, to seek and search and explore the world. And perhaps for some Scorpios, it has been about travel, or it will be about travel. You've been making plans about travel. Or for some Scorpios, it's about focusing on your education. Or for some Scorpios, it's been more philosophical or even faith. Mars going back to Leo also means that Mars will begin to face off again with Pluto. So this is really, if we're being honest, this takes you all the way back into about September, October, this really drawn out opposition to Pluto. What does that mean? Pluto oppositions demand, I know it's a strong word, but Pluto demands, it demands transformation and reformation. You have needed to transform yourself and reform yourself over the past, 6 months. And even though you're a Scorpio, you're saying, of course, transformation, I love that. But that's the thing, my joke about Scorpios is that we will transform and change when we are good and ready. And so this has perhaps been a lot of soul searching over the last 6 months, a lot of inner work. And maybe as Mars gets to the end of the ninth, it's like, after all this, Scorpio, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What is your truth? Mars going back into Leo on the 18th. Leo is your career sign. It is the title after your name. It is your public life, your public reputation. It is also your duties and responsibilities in the world. It says that until the middle of June, which is the time that Mars will be in Leo, it is about your public life and your career. Maybe you're going to be really working hard, but it is to be the fruit of all this inner work and transformation that you've been doing over the last 6 months. Mars is going to go from water to fire, the emotionality of Cancer, to the fire, the inspiration and the creativity of Leo. But again, we got that last opposition to Pluto on April 26th. So you're still sort of in the forge, so to speak, and use it powerfully, use it wisely, of course. The energy of the solar eclipse that was in Aries, which is work and projects and health and wellness and service and helping other people, will now start to point towards your career, if not for the next 5-6 weeks. So the change of the eclipse may even be showing up in your professional life. It's to see how things get kicked off with Mars going to Leo on the 18th. Sagittarius. So Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter, it's still in Gemini, but on June 9th, which it's so weird to think that's around the corner, April, May, June, 2 months from now, Jupiter will go into Cancer. as it wraps up its time in Gemini, relationships, keep this space in your view, because relationships, of course, encompass a lot of things in our life. It's not just romantic relationships, it's how you connect and interact and socialize. It's the people in your life. And Jupiter square Saturn on some level has been saying it's time to take relationships seriously. This has been since last year, to really be accountable and to show up differently and to show up on time, and all those things. And I say, sort of keep this in your vision, because Uranus will get here. I laugh. Uranus will get here on July 7th to November 7th, and it hasn't been there in your lifetime. But what this means is that relationships will change. They will transform. They will awaken. Uranus is what's called an evolutionary planet. That's another conversation for another time. We have Mercury changing signs this week. It goes into Aries. Aries is your sign of creativity, self-expression, joy, fun, and Mercury rules that Virgo eclipse that we had on March 14th. So it pulls the energy of that eclipse, career, Virgo, your public life and reputation, towards the 5th. It's a time for you to do something new that's creative, something that's expressive, expressing who you are, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and perhaps even to be recognized for something. Then there's Mars. It's going into Leo. Leo is your 9th sign. So Mars is getting out of your 8th, hurrah, where it's been bringing up a lot of deep emotions, a lot of navel gazing and soul searching since the beginning of the year and even last year. And Mars will go into your 9th. And so for the next 6 weeks until the middle of June, it's a time for you to really travel, explore, see the world, to and literally and figuratively. The 9th is about searching outside of ourselves for answers. The 9th is also about faith and truth and meeting. What do you stand for, Sagittarius? What do you believe in? I know Sag is typically a sign that has a lot of opinions, a lot of ideas, but this might be a period of your life where you share them, you teach them. And Sagittarius, in its highest expression, what we should all reach for is Sagittarius is to be the torch. It is to show the way. It is to light the path. It's not the path, it could be a path, but it is to stand in a space of illumination and inspiration for the next 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks. Like I said, highest of the high. So that said, the energy of the Aries solar eclipse, Aries is your talents, your gifts, your abilities, your self-expression, your creativity, the things that light you up, that get you out of bed in the morning. And now that eclipse is going to point its energy towards the 9th. Travel, exploration, getting your voice out there, publishing something, speaking about something, your faith, your truth, your wisdom, and your knowledge. And that's where a lot of the things are happening. And then, of course, we've got some bigger things down the road. It's just a big time to be a Sagittarius or a Sagittarius rising. Capricorn, so Saturn is your planet, and what do we have? We have like 6 weeks until Saturn changes signs. And so Saturn going into Aries on May 24th is a shift of your personal clock. It's taking you out of the energies of Pisces, which is sometimes floaty and sometimes liminal, and putting you towards the energies of action, new beginnings, and moving forward. We are not there yet, of course, but just to put it in your view. That said, we just had an eclipse in that part of your chart: home, family, roots, foundation, action, drive, power. And that part of the chart is your living situation, it's your home environment, it's your family, and that's where a lot of the energy of new beginnings are showing up into September. Then, of course, Saturn will get there. We'll talk more about that when we get closer to May. But I wanted to point out Mars changing signs this week, because Mars is going to go into Leo, and Mars is going to take the energy of that eclipse and take it out of Cancer, where it's been for the better part of 6 months. Mars went into Cancer on January 6th. But it was in Cancer from September 4th all the way until, I think it was the 1st of November, the 3rd of November, one of those 2 times. So it's going to move it from relationships. So there's been a lot of things going on in relationships. It's not just capital R, romantic relationships, it's also the people in your life. It's probably been a very busy time with other people in your life. And then it's going to move the energy towards the eighth. The eighth is where we need to face ourselves. We need to look into the deepest parts of our emotional self. It is trust, it is intimacy, it is power, it is control. And that energy of the eclipse of the solar eclipse new moon is going to point towards the eighth. It could be a time to really let something go around family, the past, and memory, and maybe something that's been taking up a lot of internal real estate. It also says that new beginnings, you may need to sort of face yourself and sort of look at a lot of the complicated emotions that sometimes come up with these new beginnings. Mars, when it goes into Leo, it'll begin to face off with Pluto again. Pluto is in your sign of money, income, material stability, and security. It went back into that space on November 19th. It will be there for the better part of 2 decades. Just represents this bigger time of really, reforming your relationship with money, income, material stability and security, but even self-worth and value. Intense emotions may be coming up this week and next week, but of course it is to really find your anchor point, your grounding, and to also make sure that there is the people that you trust around you to help give you the support. Aquarius, so Saturn is your planet. It's still in Pisces, but it will go into Aries on March 24th. So that's 6 weeks until you have the sort of that personal shift and new beginning. Aries for you is something called your third sign. The third sign on one level is voice and communication, how you think and listen and learn. And on another level, it creates a lot of movement and restlessness and exploration. I need to try things, I need to learn things, I need to go and travel, maybe sort of short-term travel. And it's also the space where we just had a solar eclipse back on March 29th. So that's where the energy of new beginnings is for you, Aquarius. So maybe you're taking classes or planning to take class, you're focusing on your education. It could be about the neighborhood, it could be about siblings. The energy of that eclipse was also pointing towards Cancer, your 6th sign of health and wellness. It could also be service and helping other people. So the energy of the eclipse are primarily pointed towards those 2 areas. But then with Mars changing signs this week, it will go into Leo on April 18th. It will move the energy of the eclipse towards relationships. And for 5-6 weeks, you may see changes in relationship. This could be changes in the status of a relationship. This could be new people coming into your life. This could be a need to really bring new people in your life. You feel really inspired and motivated to connect and interact with people. But keep in mind, Aquarius, that Pluto is now in your sign. It is a long-term influence. It's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. I know. But this is, whatever's happening, it's part of a bigger shift in your life, a bigger structural shift in your life. And this is going to be particular to each and every Aquarius or Aquarius rising. So with the Mars opposite Pluto, Mars is a career planet. It talks about responsibilities and duties, your public life, your public reputation. And the opposite of Pluto says that something needs to change and reform. It could be also talking about your career, a change in relationship in your professional life, looking at themes around power and control in a relationship, even a professional relationship. It's putting you, Aquarius, a little bit in the squeeze for the next couple of weeks. It's just to be really well present with what comes up with Pluto, because Pluto is always trying to show us something. Very often we want to push it away, but Pluto's always trying to show us something that's typically hidden within ourselves. And maybe that's showing up in relationships, maybe that's showing up in career. The energy of the new moon, it still says that this is a time to really create new beginnings and how you think and listen and learn, or travel, or even your education. Mercury will change signs this week. It will go back into Aries, and for you, Aquarius, Aries is that third sign. So it's just probably going to be a really busy next couple of weeks and even into the first half of May. Finally, Pisces. Pisces, so Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter has got like a couple months left, if we can believe that, in Gemini. So this has just been since May of 2024, a time where family, home, your living situation, your roots, your foundation have been the major focus and priority. That will begin to change on June 9th when Jupiter goes into Cancer, and that will open up a year-long period where it's more about getting in touch with the things that light you up and give you joy, fun, play. You're like, oh, I love this. Jupiter loves Cancer, and it could be about children. It could be about, or the things that are like children in the sense that you take the best of yourself and you put it into something. In the meantime, it's just a lot going on in Pisces or Pisces rising's astrology. It just continues to be a time where Saturn is the major arc of the astrology, to take things seriously, to step into new roles of duty, power, and responsibility. You had that Virgo full moon lunar eclipse on the 14th of March. And I want to highlight that because Virgo for you is relationships. It's other people. It's also a serious relationship if you're in a relationship, or it could be people coming into your life. With Mercury changing signs, Mercury ruled that eclipse from last month, but it'll activate the energy of the eclipse on the 16th throughout the week and even into next week. So we may see new beginnings in relationship, a time where you and another person are making investments or talking about money or even talking about the value and worth of something. If it's not about you and another person, it could be looking at the role of relationships in your life and the role of self-worth and power, and how you invest in relationships in your life. Also, we have Mars changing signs this week. It's going to leave Cancer. Cancer is a fellow water sign, so it's been so much about really focusing on the things that sort of fulfill you and light you up and getting back to yourself. And that's been part of the retrograde season. But Mars will go into Leo, and Leo is something called your sixth sign. Health, wellness, taking care of the details, putting things in order, the operations of your life, but it's also service and helping other people. Mars going into Leo puts that area, that's where the energy of action is, until the middle of June. But Mars will make a final opposition to Pluto. Mars on some level is about desire. It's about power, but in opposition to Pluto, and Pluto has recently, as of November, gone into your 12th. What is it that you want? What is it that is your relationship with power and desire versus what are the wants and needs of your higher self? What needs to reform and transform? It's a little bit of an esoteric point, but it also could mean that something in your blind spots, the deepest parts of yourself and your soul and your spirit something needs to shift and change in your day-to-day life, to create new rituals, new practices, to change something about your diet, to clean things out, to organize, to change the operations. It's some intense energy. It's not hitting you like it is some of the other signs, but it might talk about a need to create a shift in your day-to-day life that is based on a shift in what you believe in, what you stand for, what you think is true, what's your truth. But it also could be a means to really bring meaning and purpose into your day-to-day rituals and life. So that's where a lot's going on right now, Pisces. It's just a lot in your astrology, especially as we get past these eclipses, and this is all preparing you for June. June's going to be a big month. We're not there yet, but we will talk about that as we get there. So that is your look at the astrology of this week. I know this is pre-recorded, and of course you can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. I know some of you are my clients. You can book a consultation with me. We can see where these eclipses and these energies are really showing up in your life. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube, and I look forward to reconnecting with you all live when I get back tanned, I hope, next week on Monday. Take care. Bye-bye.